lots to talk about with our power panel. We're going to do that right now. Yes, right now. So let's say hello to the power panel, and here they are. Who's coming up first on my screen? It is Supriya. Supriya? No, it's Jason. There's Jason, not Supriya. Okay, Jason Markusoff, there you are. And next on my screen is, there's Shakir Chambers, and next is, so there's Supriya. Hi, Supriya Dwivedi, okay. And that must mean it's Françoise Boivin. This is what happens sometimes when the teleprompter, the magic box in front of me that tells me the words to say, doesn't totally line up with things. Okay, let's talk about what has just happened with Jason Kenney. And I'll go to Calgary. Jason, this is a one-for-one swap. I suppose the gamble here is he's going to somehow make Tyler Shandro responsible for everything that's going on. What are the odds that it will work with the public and, more importantly, within his own party?
I don't think this does much to help Jason Kenney. It's an inflection point. It's a news story on the day. It somewhat takes attention away from Jason Kenney himself on a day when all eyes in Alberta were looking to him. Huge pressure mounting from all over his party, every faction of his party, for him to resign. I'm not clear at this point whether Tyler Shandro was pushed out by Jason Kenney as an attempt to reboot his government, or if Tyler Shandro just quit, fed up with Jason Kenney's top-down decision making on healthcare, on public health measures. His decision making, he's very autocratic, very much like it's his decision. You saw last month that virtually nothing happened in his government while he was off vacationing in Europe at the end of the month. So that's a problem for Jason Kenney. It could well be that Tyler Shandro said, "I've had it. I'll stay in cabinet, but get me out of here, because I don't want to be your, carry out your terrible news anymore." The things he's had to, they've been doing with Tyler Shandro in office have been terrible. He's not a great minister by most people's definition either, but this is very much Jason Kenney may have had to do this either to save his own skin or because Tyler forced his hand.
Shakir, I want to ask you just about the body blow of the UCP Vice President, Joel Mullen, penning this op-ed in the Western Standard, a conservative publication. He's saying Kenney must resign now. When you have a call like that, when you have all these reports that are coming from inside caucus that they have managed to keep things quiet in the face of a federal election campaign that they didn't want to distract or pollute the Erin O'Toole campaign by what's going on in Alberta political circles. But can you see a way in which Jason Kenney can survive given the rumblings, the very loud rumblings?
I mean, anything is possible. I read that article. What he articulates there is pretty true. I mean, the management, the planning and the communications around COVID response by the Alberta government has been absolutely atrocious. So I definitely agree on that point. But he also highlights in that article the pressures that Jason Kenney feels in Alberta, right? On one side, you have the public health measures where they're telling you, put in restrictions, implement a vaccine passport, and he's so firm against not doing it. And he waits and he finally does it. So he upsets that side because he took so long. On the other side, he has his base and his party members who want no restrictions at all and thought he was going to stand firm. And then he flip-flops. So it shows you when he flip-flops, he can't win on either side. So it just shows the kind of pressure that he's under. The one thing I would say is in my province, we had a premier who was unpopular for his COVID management. He's taken steps to kind of recuperate his reputation, and I think he's doing pretty steady in the polls right now, pretty steady in popularity. So I think there's always a path forward to stabilizing your popularity and heading into the next election. But I would say Jason Kenney's facing some different challenges, right? His caucus is obviously extremely upset. They want him gone. So I'm not sure how he survives, but I never underestimate the ego of a politician to stay in place despite pressure.
All right, Supriya, I want to talk to you about the United Conservative Party, not so united these days, at least not united behind their leader. The question, of course, is Jason Kenney was in some ways the guy who was able to unite them all under one tent and said, we have to be here if we want to be able to take on the NDP and win back government from the NDP, of course, held it provincially at the time. So I suppose the question is, if we do move to a post-Kenney environment, what happens to the UCP? Any thoughts?
I mean, that's a great question. I'd imagine, though, that the UCP can withstand a leader resigning and stepping down and somebody else sort of stepping up. I don't think the party's so new that it's not as though they're entirely branded and linked to Mr. Kenney himself, right? I think there's an opportunity here to shed some of that dead weight, if you will, that Kenney is clearly putting on to the party, as both Jason and Shakir have sort of outlined here. And I think if they do want a fighting chance in the next election, they are going to need to move past this, whether or not that's the Premier himself stepping down, or whether that's actually acting, when the health measures require you to act, and not sort of dilly-dallying and hiding behind, ideological reasoning or philosophy, and just, following the math. And this is what I think gets so many of us that are outside of the province just watching this, is that it was very clear to anyone who I'm not even talking about having an advanced public health degree. I'm just talking about having a basic understanding of exponents. We're talking grade 6 math. If you understood that, you knew that, when all of these restrictions were lifted in July, that this was going to happen, that there was going to be this sort of case explosion. And the whole notion of, cases being completely decoupled from hospitalizations was always sort of poppycock, because there is still a sizable portion of the population in Alberta that is unvaccinated. And unfortunately, every child under the age of 12 is still currently unvaccinated. So, this is what happens when you put partisan ideology or philosophical differences ahead of what should be good common sense governance. And it's really hard to feel bad for a guy like Kenney, because, you reap what you sow.
Mm-hmm. Of course, there are consequences for that. I mean, I take your point that it may be hard to feel bad for someone who reaps what they sow, but there are implications right across the province for people who are sick.
Oh, of course. I feel bad for regular Albertans. Don't get me wrong, 100%. I'm talking about the political class.
Mm-hmm. Francoise, I want to talk to you about timing. I recently heard there was a federal election that happened in Canada, and I think it was as recent as... I know. Just I think it was yesterday. Someone mentioned that. Perhaps a little less exciting in the end than what is happening now in Alberta. But there is a question of timing here. So this cabinet shuffle could have happened yesterday, or perhaps last week or 2 weeks ago. But we've had 5 weeks of a federal election campaign. Do you think the timing is any accident, that it's all happening, airing of dirty laundry much more out in public on the day after the federal election?
I'm not so sure. I will ponder on that one after I say what I'm thinking. Imagine, because I didn't see any necessarily link with the federal election on the cabinet shuffle, because it's actually two guys switching job, and probably for the reason that we all think that Minister Shandro was not wanting to be the scapegoat for once, and just didn't feel at ease in that portfolio. I don't think there's anybody in Alberta would feel really comfortable as a health minister, because they lack the leadership at the top with Jason Kenney. I think if they could have hold as long as they could after the federal campaign, they would have. But the situation is so critical in Alberta from every reports we get, and Jason is much more in the know than I am out of here, Gatineau, Quebec. But from what we're hearing, the situation is dramatic in hospitals. Doctors, nurses, all the frontline workers have been saying so for a long time, and they finally clued, and they had no choice. So I think the timing was not so much decided by them, but dictated by the event, because I don't think Jason Kenney woke up one morning last week and this week and said, how can I'm looking for a nice term for TV, but make life miserable for Erin O'Toole. I'm not so sure that's what he did. I think he had no choice, but that proves to me that he is lacking the leadership that Alberta is in dire need right now.
So let me go back to Supriya on the timing of this, the timing that it happens the day after the election. Your thoughts?
Look, I mean, I'd like to be as charitable as Françoise was just there. I'd have to suspect that timing definitely factored into this. You know, I'm not going to imbue any motives onto the Premier here, but it's hard to imagine that this, you know, wasn't sort of part of the calculus, I guess is all I will say. And I mean, you know, to the point that I think was raised when Alberta made the announcements to go forward with a few restrictions, I think there was a lot of rumblings as to, well, you know, why didn't you announce these sooner? And it's like he tried to, I think, again, I keep powder dry for as long as possible, and he just simply couldn't wait anymore. And then, you know, that opens up a whole host of other questions as to why didn't he act sooner, and did he not simply act sooner for to save, you know, the optics, I guess, of the federal Conservative campaign. But that just takes you down a very icky road that I don't think, you know, we really want to go down.
Shakir, let me ask you about Jason Kenney himself, because you know, this is a man who has a long history in political life, very long, and was seen within the Conservative movement as this great strategist, a guy who would go provincial and then return potentially to the federal level, who was seen almost as a successor to Stephen Harper and his ideology. What happened?
Good question. I mean, it's a lot different when you're in the driver's seat and you got to make those difficult decisions. COVID, like I said, hasn't been easy to manage in Alberta, especially given the pressures he gets on both sides of these issues. I don't know. I think for someone like Kenney, if he had any hopes of going federal, those are certainly on hold, if not for the next decade, for an extremely long time. I can't look at anybody seeing him run as a federal Conservative candidate and kind of forgetting his mismanagement of COVID-19. So it's a shame. I don't know what kind of politics should have played to delay the restrictions coming into place right now, but it's a shame that it's come to this, and it's a shame that despite being in a fourth wave, it's been the same trip up for the Alberta government time after time after time again. Again, at least my government in Ontario, they've learned from some of their mistakes and at least followed some of the public health guidance and put in provisions in place to keep cases low. So yeah, it's a tragedy what's going on there, but I don't think Jason has hopes of running federally anytime soon after this.
Jason Markusoff, I've only got about 30 seconds left here, but you know, let me ask you, is the position specific to Jason Kenney, or would anybody in that role face the challenge of being pulled in different directions just because of who is in your caucus? That you have some people in a situation like this who would want absolutely no restrictions and some who are demanding more?
To some extent, maybe, but we've seen pressures in other provinces and they've been able to manage. It's the level of tragedy in this province right now is extreme, with people's surgeries being canceled by the thousands, ICU patients, so many deaths, cases rising, so many people in isolation. And it's sad that we're talking about this in so much of a political terms, but the reality is that so much of what Jason Kenney's decision making is informed by politics, and that is an extreme shame.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.